Why do I want to come off antidepressants after 30 years? That's a good question. Well, mainly I want to know who I am without this drug. We don't know the efficacy of antidepressants over decades, so we don't know if they still work as effectively. And also, antidepressant use as we age can possibly cause physical difficulties that can be detrimental to our physical health. So they're sort of the main reasons. But I want to know who I am without this drug. And I did actually start tapering about 5 years ago. However, excuse me, at the time I started to feel really unwell. And even with lots of investigation and an increase of mirtazapine, I still felt unwell. And eventually we discovered it was perimenopause. So I've spent the last few years getting sort of more balanced on HRT. And now I feel it's the time. I want to know who I am without this drug, and I want to know that I can be without it. I don't see it as a flaw if I did need it, but I don't believe I do. I have had lots of therapy over the years. I've done a lot of reading. I've even done a lot of training myself. And I think the very crux of my issues were probably started from even before I was born, when my birth mother decided she would have to give me up for adoption. And then, of course, there was the birth trauma for me and her, I suppose, of being separated from the only safe place and person I knew. And that has affected me throughout my life, although I've not known that was probably what it was. It also makes a great deal of sense as to why I struggled after I had my own daughter. You know, something was probably triggered within me. I can still remember those feelings of, how can I look after this little gorgeous little poppet when I'm terrified of myself? And I wasn't before I got pregnant, but then this is the kind of thing that came up. And when I look back through the times when I was living with anxiety and panic disorders, the ultimate fear, the strongest fear, was that somehow I couldn't survive. And that makes sense now with the understanding that I have around being an adoptee. Because people would say to me, well, surely if there's some kind of trauma, you could remember it. But babies don't have that cognitive ability to store memories. Their brains aren't developed enough, but their bodies can remember. And so that also explained why a lot of my symptoms were incredibly physical, and I couldn't find a thought in my head or a place in my head where it came from, because quite often if you look at some of the sort of counselling therapeutic approaches, they say, well, what was the thought that triggered the feeling? And it was never that way round. It was always, what was the feeling that triggered the thought, and the feeling would then create the thought that I can't survive, I'm going to be annihilated. That was a really big word. When I was, I suppose this would be about 14 years ago, when I hit complete mental health crisis, I would say to my CBT therapist, who was fantastic, it was one-to-one intense therapy, that he'd say, what do you fear? And I said that I'm just not going to exist anymore, that somehow, and he said, well, you fear dying? And I said, no, I fear not being, I fear being annihilated. So just not being here, not existing. So now that I know these things, I feel I'm much better. Gosh, I hate Menno brain. I'm better prepared to deal with when I'm triggered. I'm far more compassionate to the part of me that still grieves for the loss of a birth mum, that was always sort of, as adoptees, it's very easy for people to say, you should feel grateful. And if you've seen some of my silly Maureen and judgmental clips, you'll know that Society can see adoption as a wonderful, beautiful thing, and it is, but you have to address the trauma that goes with it. Otherwise, you're denying a part of that child, baby, whatever. Anyway, I wasn't going to get onto all of that today. I was just going to answer the question about why do I want to taper antidepressants, and I think I've answered it, but if I haven't, please let me know in the comments, and maybe next time I shall have notes in front of me to keep me on track. Goodbye from me and Molly, and have a good day.